This year, my Patriot writers will be using the evolution of a term to write their expository compositions for this year's STAR writing test. And I want to give you a short walkthrough of this writing technique using an example from Lucy Torres, a student in my 7th period writing class. The expository prompt that we worked on is the one that includes a quotation by Michael Jordan, and it reads, "If you run into a wall, don't turn around and give up. Figure out how to climb it, go through it, or work around it." My students know that if they're going to use the quotation, they need to say something new about it and not just include it in a composition. Otherwise, it's what is called a dead giveaway. You really didn't do anything with the quote. So I told my students, if you're going to use it, make sure you say something new about it. Either provide an example or illustration that extends the meaning of the quote, agree with it and say why, or disagree with it and say why. The second part of an expository prompt, of course, is the think carefully statement or question. I encourage my students to analyze every part of the prompt because you never know when you're going to get an idea for writing. This one was very helpful. No one can achieve success without overcoming obstacles. Now here, Lucy used a dictionary and defined an obstacle as something that blocks you from getting what you want. So because she took the time to think carefully about the statement, she realizes that her composition has to talk about some kind of obstacle in which she never gave up, or maybe she did give up and she learned the value of not doing so. The third part is what the Writing Academy calls the charge. Write an essay explaining the importance of never giving up. Here, Lucy boxed the term, never giving up. And she knows that she has to explain the meaning of that term. Because Lucy wants to get a high score, and in my case, a high score is anything up above a 5, so anything that's a 6, a 7, or an 8. Because Lucy wants to get a high score, she's going to take a creative risk. She's going to use something different called evolution of a term. Now, in an evolution of a term, you do have to clearly state your thesis, but instead of stating it at the very beginning, you're going to save it at the very end as a conclusion of your thinking of what never giving up means. So what is evolution of a term? Well, the first part of your essay, you talk about what never giving up meant to you when you were younger. In Lucy's case, she came up with 3 ideas. She never gave up on writing her name, never gave up on how to learn how to ride a bike, and she never gave up on how to read. Notice that either one of these examples relates to her teenage experience, and that's what the scores are looking for. They want an authentic response from the student writer. She could easily choose the first one and talk about how she never gave up on learning how to write her name. It's a unique example, and it's going to set her paper apart from everybody else. Then she's going to go deeper with the meaning of never give up. In the middle part of her paper, she's going to talk about what never giving up means to her now. I have told my students that when you get to the middle part of the evolution of a term, to step away from themselves and instead use a literary, historical, or current event reference. Here she has a whole bunch. She has Of Mice and Men, Finding Dory, Inside Out, The Giver, a book that she's currently reading with her reading teacher. She has Sugarcane Fire, one of the many David Rice short stories that we've read this year. She has The Patriots, when they never gave up on winning the Super Bowl, and she also has a reference of Dr. Martin Luther King, where he never gave up on civil rights. Now, obviously, she's not going to write about all of these, but she can easily choose 1 or 2 where she can go deeply with her explanation. Notice that in the second bullet, it clearly states, be sure to organize and develop your ideas effectively. Here, she's going deeper with her explanation of what never giving up means. Now, with Of Mice and Men, she wrote down that George gave up on the dream. Now, if you recall from that film or the book, George had to kill Lenny in order to give Lenny a respectful death. However, he still had the choice of fulfilling their dream of owning a farm. He easily could have returned to the Tyler Ranch, and he easily could have invited Candy to join him, to continue to join him on the dream and say, hey, you know what, Candy? Let's do it for Lenny. Let's make our dream come true and do it for Lenny. But he didn't do that. He gave up on the dream, and therefore his life became filled with sadness. So that is a very unique example to use by going the very opposite and saying, look, this is what never giving up means to me now, because I read about a character who gave up, and look what happened to his life. She can also focus on Finding Dory, where Dory and her friends, which included Nemo and his dad, never gave up on finding her parents. She could also focus on Inside Out, how Joy never gave up on saving Riley. Or she could also focus on The Giver and how Jonas never gave up in giving the community emotions. For Sugarcane Fire, she could easily focus on Romero Rios and how he never gave up on pursuing Veronica, an 8th grader. And even though he didn't get her, he ended up getting something more awesome. He ended up getting her older sister, Annette. So that shows you the value of never giving up. Or she could talk about the Patriots, that even though they were behind in the second half, they never gave up on themselves and they found a way to win the Super Bowl and make history. And she could also talk about what our world would be like if Dr. Martin Luther King had given up on the civil rights movement. So whether she chooses one or two examples or just one, notice that she's going deeper with the meaning of never giving up. She's telling the reader, look, right now, this is what this term means to me right now, but it's going to continue to evolve. That makes her paper look and sound sophisticated. The third and final part of evolution of a term is what never giving up might mean in the future. In her case, she decided that she's going to focus on never giving up on her dreams. So here it's sort of like a reflection or a wondering of how that term and its meaning will change in the future. Now, she has to unify all three parts of evolution of a term, and that's where she comes up with the controlling idea, or what I like to call a conclusion, something that unifies all of these meanings. Some examples that she came up with were never giving up is a gift, never giving up is a blessing, or never giving up is located in the heart. That would be the controlling idea that unifies and closes her paper. I'm really excited to see how student writing will improve using evolution of a term, and I have a delightful feeling that we're going to get some really high scores when the results come back. Thank you and enjoy your evening.